The Sacramento Kings, for most of my lifetime, have been a dumpster fire of an organization that has wallowed in the NBA draft lottery. But looking at this year, in 2023, they had one of the biggest single-year turnarounds in recent NBA history. And this massive turnaround for Sacramento has been 8 years in the making and has finally come together after solid draft picks, great trades, and key off-season signings. And if you want to pinpoint where this rebuild started, I would say even in 2017, when they traded DeMarcus Cousins, their superstar center, who won 0 playoff games in 7 years. And looking back at this trade, of course, involved DeMarcus, Omar Caspi going to the Pelicans for Tyreek Evans, Langston Galloway, and Buddy Hield. At the time, this trade was dubbed one of the biggest fleeces in NBA history, and many said Sacramento got stomped in this exchange. And it was so bad for a couple years, there were serious debates whether the Kings should leave Sacramento and head to Seattle. That's how bad it was for this organization and this franchise. Now, staying on that Boogie trade for a second, the biggest piece Sacramento got was Buddy Hield, who at the time was a rookie. And for the Kings, Buddy's overall development will be vital 5 years later as they'd flip him in another massive blockbuster trade. But staying in 2017, the last thing I do want to look at is that year's draft, where the Kings got the immortal De'Aaron Fox with the 5th pick. And looking at this draft class, undoubtedly, there was superstar potential far and wide. But with hindsight being 2020, the Kings in this draft avoided tons of busts and players who wouldn't pan out. As with the top 2 picks, you had Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball. At number 3, of course, you had Tatum going to the Celtics, who obviously is a superstar and a home run pick. But past that, at number 4, you have Josh Jackson, then De'Aaron Fox, and number 6, Jonathan Isaac. De'Aaron Fox, quite literally, was in a minefield of busts and underachievers. And looking at the point guard position, in this draft class, past De'Aaron, it was pretty pathetic. As at number 8, the Knicks would take Frank Ntilikina, and number 9, the Mavs would take Dennis Smith Jr. Say what you want about the Kings in the draft history, but in this draft, they hit it on the head, getting a home run in De'Aaron and a future face of their franchise. Now, with that being said, of course, hindsight, as always, is 2020, and with the Kings, that is very prevalent. As De'Aaron from 2018 to 2022 had some serious question marks and doubts whether he was a superstar or an all-star player. And after 2020, which had a 5-year max extension, there were many question marks about his overall ability and potential. And building off that, in 2019, the Kings extended Buddy Hield to a 4-year, $94 million deal. Looking back 3 years ago, De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield were the quote-unquote guys for the Kings franchise. And as we've seen numerous times, having Buddy Hield as your second best player isn't a recipe for success. So what did Sacramento do? They built in the draft, hitting more home runs. As in last year's draft, they got Keegan Murray, a solid two-way player who shoots 41% from behind the arc. The year before that, they got Davion Mitchell, who doesn't get a lot of playing time, but when he does, is a top-tier perimeter defender. And last but not least, you had Tyrese Haliburton, who is an all-star now, and debatably a top 25 player. Those picks right there for the Kings were all hits, and getting Haliburton, quite literally, would change everything. As halfway into his second year, he was involved in the iconic and high controversial trade to the Indiana Pacers for DeMarcus Sabonis. And looking at this trade, the Pacers, of course, got Haliburton, also Buddy Hield, a key piece, and Tristan Thompson. The Kings got Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a second-round pick. Looking at that trade in 2023, it seems overly fair. But once again, in the moment, the Kings were mocked far and wide. ESPN, Fox Sports, podcasts, players, coaches, everyone thought this trade was a robbery in Indiana's favor. If I had to estimate, it was 98.7% negative coverage of this trade for Sacramento. And one thing I vividly remember is the outrage that Sacramento chose Fox over Haliburton as the face of their franchise, as many thought Haliburton was actually the better player. And while I disagree with that, I can understand where they're coming from given his potential and great play at a young age. The one thing looking back on this, everyone has to realize having 2 point guards who are pretty ball dominant isn't a recipe for playoff success, historically, or just in general for basketball. And this trade quite literally benefited Fox as well as Haliburton, as both these guys unlocked their true potential as all-star players, with Haliburton being an all-star this year, averaging 20 and 10, shooting 40% from deep, and Fox himself averaging 25 and being the best clutch player in the entire NBA. And there's an old saying in football that if you have 2 quarterbacks, really, you don't have one. And this old school phrase applies to Fox and Haliburton pretty well, as back in 2022, quite literally, they were at a crossroads of their franchise. Go with Haliburton, the younger player, or De'Aaron Fox, the 5-year vet who's been proven in Sacramento as an elite scorer. And luckily for them, they chose Fox over Haliburton while also getting DeMarcus Sabonis. And staying with Sabonis, his overall impact was felt from day one, as Sacramento this year has the best offense in the entire NBA. And while Sabonis is a proven all-star player and the centerpiece of that trade, what you have to have beyond that is great role players who complement your 2 stars. And for Sacramento, they did just that, giving Kevin Huerter, only trading Mo Harkless and Justin Holiday in a steal of a trade. And shortly after that, they got Malik Monk on a measly 2-year, $19 million deal. And having Malik and Kevin on the same team, they very much are different players, but offensively, they're fearless and can score all 3 levels while creating their own shot. As we know when it comes to playoffs, that is key for any team and their role players off the bench. And looking at Monk, his connection to Fox goes back all the way to Kentucky, as in the 2017 draft lottery, him and Fox were both picked in the top 13. But unfortunately for Monk, playing in Charlotte, even Los Angeles, he was highly underwhelming. But finally in Sacramento, his full potential has been tapped as a heat check player, much like J.R. Smith with the Knicks. And why I love this Kings team so much is a lot of their players have been written off, cast off, or just underrated for their entire careers. Whether it be Fox, Sabonis, Malik Monk, whoever it may be. A lot of these guys this year, even individually, have exceeded expectations. And their head coach Mike Brown is finally showing what he can do with a confident team and supporting cast. As with him at the helm, this Kings team this year has the best offensive rating in NBA history. And to provide some context of how unlikely that was, coming into the year, they were projected to only win 34.5 games. That was 22nd in the entire NBA. The Hornets, Wizards, Blazers, Bulls, Mavs, T-Wolves, and Raptors were all projected to win more games than this Kings team. Going from a projected bottom 10 team to a top 3 team in the West is virtually unheard of. And for the playoffs, once again, they were massive underdogs. As in the last 35 years, they are the biggest top 3 seed underdog of all time. And you had certain teams in the West actually wanting to play the Kings. But after watching this Warriors series, I don't think anyone will want to play this Kings team on purpose in the first round. So really in summary, this Kings team and this overall franchise has been due for a team that inspires the city. After having Boogie Cousins, a bona fide superstar, and wasting his entire prime, it's finally great to see Sacramento had done something right with trades, draft picks, and offseason signings. And like I said before, this Kings team in the front office and on the court proving everyone wrong has been fun to root for and a thrill in the playoffs. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.